Hello, everyone. My name is Chingu. I'm Professor of Leadership in Education and Director of the UCL Center on Educational Leadership. I'm just delighted and really excited to introduce this public leadership forum, evidence-based research on school belonging, hosted by Professor Kathryn Riley. Kathryn I have deep respect for Kathryn's passion and scholarship, world-leading scholarship in the field of school belonging, because she really has brought different disciplines and school leaders, scholars into her research around belonging. I led a research project in South Africa, and that project has really led me to look into more deeply and appreciate what real belonging means in schools, in communities, and how important it is to really create exciting and intellectually and also socially exciting places for the learning and achievement of both teachers and also children and young people. I'm extremely excited because in the panel today, we not only have scholars and head teachers, school leaders, but also a group of young people from a school. So I'm going to hand over to Kathryn to share the excitement of what she has learned from her research about school belonging. Over to you, Kathryn.
Thank you, Ching, and a warm welcome to everybody. I don't know if you can see me. I'm not sure if I'm on the screen at the moment, but hopefully that I am on the screen. Yes. Somebody let me know that. So a welcome to you. I'm Kathryn Riley, and I'm Emeritus Professor of Education. And in case you're wondering what that is, my grandson said, "What's emeritus?" And I said, "Your number's got the gold star." So I get the gold star, which is kind of really nice. I quite like gold stars. So I like the image of having a gold star about belonging. And today, can I welcome you, because we know what a really hugely important topic this is. And we know how belonging matters in today's really uncertain climate. And I think it matters so much for young people, many of whom feel isolated and lost and lonely in the world that we're in at the moment. And I asked the students here to guess how many people have signed up for this, and they actually guessed 250, and in fact it's 243. And so you must be interested in belonging issues to be here, and I think that is just really wonderful. And I look back to something that Bridget Phillipson, the Secretary of State for Education, of course, here in the UK, had to say about this only last November, because I think it's a beautiful description of belonging. So she made her pitch for belonging last year, saying, "Every child should go to a school where they are free to be themselves, free to make friends, free to explore their talents, where they know deep down inside that they belong." And I think that is such a powerful message. And just to begin to introduce our panel, you're going to find more out about the political nature and the need for politicians to step into the space. And I'm delighted to have Mohammed M. Meski with us today, who not only is a great friend of mine, but is now an advisor, a senior education advisor to the Moroccan Minister of Education. He's going to talk about those policy issues. And we are joined, as Ching said, by Fulhurst Community School, Rich Parker Monks, who's the deputy, and he and I have been collaborating together on school belonging issues, and some of the wonderful students there. And Dame Mary Marsh, and she just gets, I think, the kind of best job of today, because she gets to interview our young people from Fulhurst about belonging, what it's got to do with them and what they are doing at that school. I think that's going to be really interesting. Now, I've known the Dame Mary for many moons, but I only discovered recently that she got her Daneship for services to family and children. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. So before just flipping to Kellyanne, who's going to be introducing the research element, a couple of practical things, and then one thing about belonging. First of all, the session is being recorded. We will send you a link from the session later on. And also a note with some more of the detail about the project and when the final details are going to be published. And because there's a lot of you, there may be lots of questions in the chat box, and if we don't get to your question, we'll look at what you have to say and we'll try and respond to that in whatever our note is. So if I can go to the next slide, slide 2, which says the belonging conundrum. So here we are, all of us here today with this real interest on belonging, but we have this seemingly intractable conundrum. That image there I use again and again and again because that's from research I did in 2003 when I really started doing this work. And you see the image there of this child. You're thick, you're stupid, you don't belong here in the school. So the belonging conundrum is this, that we've got a lot of evidence that school belonging really makes a difference to how children feel, to their performance, to the well-being, to a whole lot of other things. We've also got the other side of it, just knowing how awful it is when young people don't feel they belong, or the negative stuff, what happens when they're excluded, and so on. But the conundrum is this, responses are patchy. Some schools, and you're going to meet one of the schools doing it, are really recognizing how important it is and they're getting stuck into it, and some aren't. So it's thinking about, why is that so patchy? If you're a school leader, you sit there, you'll be thinking, yeah, I know that we at schools can do great things for kids, but wow, the pressure's on me to do so many different things. If you're a policymaker sitting there, you're thinking, yeah, I know about this exclusion, I know the cost and the problems when kids are excluded, but I want to know the evidence, I want to know what we can really do, and I want to have value for money, because money is tight. We need to know how to really invest in this in a really positive way. So what this webinar is about is how to unlock that belonging conundrum. Next slide, please. And so we've got 3 bits of the jigsaw. There are probably more others, but today we're dealing with these 3 bits. What makes a belonging journey successful? A robust knowledge base is a good start. It's more than guesswork. And today we're so delighted to be presenting you with some new research on belonging. And I have to tell you, Kellyanne and I have wanted to do this for years, and so we're so excited that we finally got to do this work, this Delphi study that she's going to tell you about. Number 2 is a change process that works. Enthusiasm isn't enough, and it is about a theory of change for school belonging, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. And you're going to see something about that process when we move to the school. And then the 3rd bit is the leadership bit, compassionate and purposeful leadership. I'm just ploughing on in the same way, the same furrow, it's not going to get us very far. But where we're going today on it is a very specific leadership bit, and this is where Mohammed's going to take us, which is, what does this actually mean for policymakers? Why do they need to get up there, and what does that actually mean? And so, next slide, please. In a moment, I'm going to pass you on to Kellyanne, and this is not everything in the knowledge base, as it were, but it's a key bit, a robust knowledge base. This Delphi study, which is a key bit of the jigsaw. So I'm now passing the baton on to Kellyanne, who is, let me just tell you about Kellyanne. She's a great friend. She's a brilliant researcher. And you want to know anything about classroom stuff and belonging, she is it. She's Australian, but she's just coming back from Norway. And en route, she's in Bangkok in a hotel on her way back to Australia. So it's quite a journey for her. And so it's just brilliant that she's managing to do this today. In our audience, we also have some of the people are our expert panel who are part of that study, part of what we call our Global Leaders in Belonging Roundtable. And I hope that we might even get to speak to them. You never know as things go on. So Kellyanne, next slide, and I'm handing the baton over to you to talk about our Delphi study.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathryn, who you haven't heard my voice, but I just want to apologize to everybody that I don't usually sound this way, but there was something in the long haul flight last night and maybe a dash of laryngitis that has eradicated my voice somewhat. So please bear with me and let me know if there's any problems, but I'm very grateful to be presenting from Bangkok. It's a much more friendlier time zone than Australia. It would probably be around 3 a.m. in the morning. So I feel quite grateful for that. So just to begin, my job is to provide a little bit of an overview of the live Delphi, the underpinning, the methodology, to hopefully give you a sense of the excitement in the project that we have just completed. So just to go back to our original motivation, Kathryn and I were both inspired, I guess you could say, by what's called the Wingspread Declaration of School Connectedness. And for those that aren't familiar with it, it's a document that was based on a meeting that was convened in the USA at the Wingspread Convention Center back in 2003. And it was a group of educators and leaders that came together and agreed upon strategies and implications for future research. And it became documented. It's the one-pager. That document became very well cited, very iconic. It was used by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. It's still all over the internet if you Google it today. It's had a lot of traction. However, we noted that in the over the 20 years, quarter of a century since it was first published, that there's been a proliferation of research since. It needed an update. So one of our motivations was to update it, build on the strategies. The original only had 6 strategies. And therefore, that was our big ambition, to come together as almost to create a togetherness agreement of our own and update it at the same time. Next slide, please. So yes, thank you. As Kathryn mentioned, the gaps we were really aiming to fill, the first was that ongoing persistent research to practice gap that we see for so many areas in education, but it's evidenced in school belonging by the lack of interventions that are around for school belonging. And then second, the implementation challenges that many schools face. And these aren't just time and resources and systemic barriers. It's that gap in being able to access easy to understand, digestible, implementatable, understandable evidence-based strategies. These were some of the gaps that we were hoping to fill. Next slide, please. Oh, you've got too quick. The Live Delphi is what we saw as a solution to answering some of these gaps. We were driven by 3 main research questions. What evidence-based school belonging strategies are actually out there, and how can we synthesize them from the current literature? How do stakeholders, particularly children and young people, rate and prioritize these strategies? And what level of expert consensus can be achieved on the phrasing of these strategies through a live Delphi methodology? And so these 3 questions were answered through quite diverse methods. I'll go through them now, but 3 phases. And they involved engagement of stakeholders, including the live Delphi. And I see it as a really, truly collaborative piece within its own right. So in terms of phase 1, we conducted a qualitative survey with school belonging researchers, and the goal of phase 1 was to elicit the evidence-based strategies that are out there from the research. So we had inclusion criteria that it had to be empirical work that was that the strategies were being extracted from. So we excluded some of the conceptual papers, and of course they are also very important for the school belonging literature. But for the purpose of creating an evidence base, we chose empirical studies only. And we, aside from the interviews, we also hand searched and used systematic searches to make sure we weren't missing any evidence that we saw as important. We ended up with 170 strategies, and we were able to narrow them down to 20 core thematically grouped areas. So taken together, these strategies were evidence-backed. They came from studies that covered really diverse populations and schools, rural schools, international schools, urban schools. So quite a spread. And with this information, we were able to then create draft strategy statements with a focus on them being clear and actionable, ready for phase 2. Next slide, please. So we conducted in phase 2 structured online surveys to ask stakeholders to rank the strategies. Survey 1 looked at children and young people, and we reworded the strategies so that the language was accessible. Survey 2 looked at educators, school leaders, parents, NGOs, policymakers. Really, in terms of stakeholders, in terms of school belonging, it's a very broad net of people that have experienced school themselves, people within the community that have schools within their communities. Each strategy had a Likert scale for assessing importance, feasibility of the strategy, how feasible it is to implement, the cost effectiveness of the strategy, and the potential for impact, the potential for that real social change to make a difference. We received 118 adult responses and 41 5 to 16-year-olds. And we found a really high alignment and agreement between the adults and the students. And the other finding was that most of the strategies were ranked quite high and important. Next slide, please. So the part 3 is what we call in research terms the fun part. This was the live Delphi, and we conducted this with 13 experts. These included academics, practitioners, policymakers, and we'll introduce them shortly. And the goal was to refine those strategies into usable, actionable statements. So we convened in Lavina in North Bali, Indonesia. And first, our panel members engaged in these preliminary discussions where they had an opportunity to really connect that purpose of why they were looking at school belonging, why it was a priority, connect it to their personal motivations and stories, and consider issues like policy making, as well as the value of research and implementation, and what are the enablers and some of the barriers to implementing strategies. And this was quite a deep exploration of these issues. The following day, participants went into small groups, and they were guided by the findings from phase 1 and phase 2. And they were tasked with dynamically refining and evaluating those statements, making sure they were clear, feasible, and aligned with the evidence. Of most important, the strategies that they came up with needed to be implementatable. Consensus agreement of the strategies, which is a part of a Delphi methodology, was measured at the start and at the end of each round. And 4 groups worked on all of the strategies together. So each strategy had 4 opportunities to be refined. And this involved deep conversations and negotiation. It was no small undertaking for the group. A final step, panel members were asked to rank the strategies based on their perceived priority. And we ended up with 22 strategies that Kathryn will introduce. But first, I just wanted to acknowledge our global leaders in belonging. So next slide, please. Some of them are here. And we must acknowledge just the hard work that they engaged in on the day. We had Eric Anderman, Linley Anderman, Dom Aquilna, Thomas Back, Incha Diane Aprilani Azia, Katie Greenwood, Aaron Akabar, Ria Jane, Dina Mehmed Bekovic Smith, Ebony Melzak, Ebony Pirato, May Day Harry Santosa, Mersa Umiyati, and Nyoman Uramana. And they were wonderful global leaders. So I will hand you back to Kathryn now to give you a sense of some of our preliminary findings.
Yeah. And what I'd like to do is, for those of you in the, those of you who are here, if you're here, I've just been getting messages that people can't get into the meeting. If any of your colleagues have found that, do let them know that we're going to be emailing this around to them. And but what I'd like you to do, if you want to start putting some questions in the chat lines for Kellyanne and I, that's great. We're good, because in a few minutes, when I've talked a little bit more about the findings, then we're going to try and answer some of your questions. But I don't think at the moment we've got oh, wait a minute, maybe Q&A? No. So if you want to start thinking about what you want to know about what we've done and what we're finding, now is your time, because we will have a few minutes shortly to be able to talk about the findings. So next slide, please. So okay, so okay, so I think I've just got a message here about authentication. So I think, again, with your colleagues, if they're struggling to get in, I'm really, really sorry, but I think this is a security issue. But if you've got colleagues who are struggling and who just email you, say, we're really, really sorry, and Kathryn promises that you're gonna get a link to this at a later time, but you can ask them to put in any questions as well. Now, on the practical thing, because this may be a question you're going to ask, is we're going to want to know details. We're going to give you flavour of the feeling. You've got Kellyanne's talked about the methodology, and I'm going to give you a flavour, and it is a flavour of what we found. We're also going to send you a little note which summarises some of the things that she said, and a bit more about the Delphi and the methodology, because it's kind of it's a really interesting methodology. And all being well, you're going to be able to get the full findings of this in early November, all being well. But we will have your contact details, and we promise we will alert you to that. And the reason we're not publishing all the detail, because there is a lot at the moment, but it will be available on a very big article, a fulsome article, which Kellyanne is just kind of polishing off. She's taken the lead in writing that way, and other colleagues are contributing. Now, if there are also some of our colleagues, I know Vedika was trying to be a lot of people who were in Bali, put a little message, put a comment in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get you to say something about that. So just previously, it wasn't that Kellyanne and I just went and made all this up. We did have a lot of people, and we have done a lot of work on this. Okay, so it's to give you a flavour of this. Now, when I start talking about what we found from that really, really fascinating process, you're going to think, yeah, but it's not rocket science. What they're saying is obvious. Those of you who are doing great things in your school will say, yeah, but we're already doing that. Now, if you think about it, that's obvious, because if you're really working on belonging stuff, you should, all being well, be doing the kind of stuff that we've been finding as researchers. And I think the other bit is to say that what we found, from just looking, not just looking at the literature, but the evidential bit and all working together, it is so interesting. It is so enjoyable working on these issues together. And And so this is not hard work doing this. This is really enjoyable stuff. So broadly speaking, what is so interesting was the perceptions of the different groups, and that by and large, what all the different groups said, what the young people had to say, what the different stakeholders had to say, and what the different experts, teachers, everybody in education say were broadly similar. And this is the bit that's not rocket science, but actually we know we should be doing this, but sadly not all schools are doing that. That understanding, the strategies that they prioritize about understanding the diversity of children's learning needs and providing opportunities to meet those needs. Student agency, voice, feedback, all the things that many of you will already be doing in your schools. Issues about agency, and I'm going to come to come back to that word agency in a minute, are actually kind of really important. And the staff and their professional growth and culture. I mean, putting it simply, if you haven't got the staff on board and the staff don't feel they belong, well, you're really kind of wasting your time a bit. So it's the culture in which staff feel they belong and that their professionalism is growing and enriching. And the third element is very, very much about the process. Process is key in all of this. The strategic leadership and decisions need to be made through a compassionate lens and through a change process that really is planned and collaborative. And you're going to feel and get a little bit of a sense of that when we come to Fulhurst. So while I had a fun time wading into the data and then grouping it, and I came up with 6 headings, which then Kelly and I checked out, that really this just summarizes it. And you're going to say, yeah, but these are obvious. And then you think, well, if they're obvious, why aren't we doing them? So the first one is the culture and the leadership, a positive school culture, supported by strategic and compassionate leadership, and making that culture visible. And this wonderful video here is from a school, St Anthony's School in Bromley, where I did some of my original work on belonging. I love them so dearly. And this is a film they did on young people and what they can do to create belonging. Number 2, safety, physically and psychological safety, and behavior policies that are positive and relational. That is obvious. But if you look at some of the things going on in the system, this is not always obvious, and it's not always how it's played out. These are things that really matter. That's the evidence too. Learning in growth, classrooms that are inclusive, motivating, practices that support and strengthen student-teacher relationships. I did a session, I think it was last year, to Teach First, and you have to say, you're in such a great job. Because what you do in your relationship with young people matters so much. And I know Mary in one of her many lives has done a lot of work with Teach First. Voice and agency, young people have a voice, staff have a voice, communities have a voice, and agency, which I define a belief that what you do makes a difference, but also the skills and opportunities to do that. And I think for our young people, if they don't have that sense of agency in school, how are they going to get that in society? And I, some of that turn off of those young people saying school's not for me is them just thinking, well, what is in it for me? And I think the agency bit is key. Community and connections, two-way connection through communities. It's not just telling them what to do, and the whole thing of what goes on in the school and belonging and the community are closely linked. And dynamism reflection. This is a fun thing to do, actually, developing belonging, and it requires a good knowledge base and a positive change process. So that's the summary thing. And some people say, well, yeah, but why did we need to come together to learn that? Because isn't this good practice? And I say, yeah, it is. But actually, sadly, we're not doing it in all our schools, and that there are some real gaps. So before I go on, I'm going to get into a Q&A and see what people have put in the Q&A. Right. Oh yeah, there were. Yeah, Adam. Yes, there were. School teacher leaders. Yes, there were. And they're kind of part of the deal. So we had a range of people, and actually one of the people who's just been texting me said, I can't get in. Don was very much a practitioner who joined us, and we also involved other practitioners in Bali and linked with a range of other people. So yeah, practitioner voice in there, teacher's voice on all kinds of different levels. And yeah, I'm not going to answer that one about what are the most powerful insights about school belonging, because in a way, whoever asked that, I'm going to almost be asking you that when you hear what the young people have to say. So I'm not going to do that. Oh yes, Diana said to me, I need to read out the questions because of course you guys can't see the questions. So there was a so those are some of the questions that we've been asked about. What are the insights that you've had? You're going to see that yourself. Did we involve staff? Oh yes, we did. We really involved staff. And Kellyanne, can you just do reminding? You're going to get this in a briefing note. We're going to do a little briefing note on this, of the size, just the size of the sample, and it's just the thing about, because it's a kind of complicated bit, that the numbers.
Yes, because we more or less had 3 mini studies. So Jen, I think your question might be related to that, the Delphi aspect, and that we had 13 experts in the Delphi group.
I think the question, Kellyanne, was about the how many, when we did the original surveys, how many young people, how many stakeholders, how many
had 118 adult stakeholders and 41 5 to 16-year-olds. And in the original round, we ended up with 170 strategies where we elicited the evidence base from the literature.
And you'll get to see more about that. Were support staff included? Not well, actually, in the stakeholders thing, Kellyanne.
Absolutely. In terms of stakeholders, and who needs to have a say in terms of school belonging, it was a very broad net. So absolutely, support staff were included.
Okay. If you keep putting the questions in, we will answer them as we go along to the best of our abilities. And poor Kellyanne will do the best. She needs a fisherman's friend, which my mother always used to recommend when people had a really sore throat. So we need to get a fisherman's friend throat sweet out to you there to keep you going. Okay, let's go on to slide 13, because the excitement builds as we begin to think about moving to Fulhurst and see what on earth they're up to. So it's the next slide after this one, please. Okay, so I've talked very, very briefly about a theory of change. I'm completing a book about this, which hopefully will be available free online, by Bloomsbury, called Leading for School Belonging, How to Navigate Your Way Ahead. And it's this whole thing about really thinking it through, articulating the challenges, identifying the positive changes that you're trying to do, clarifying how you expect change to happen, putting the steps in place to ensure success, and deciding how when you will have achieved things. So it's all of these things. I mean, look at these images. Now, I put that umbrella up, not just because I'm from Manchester and I think about rain, because we have this notion of the belonging umbrellas. It's a kind of lovely metaphor, but in the sunshine, of course, a belonging umbrella is a lovely thing. It colours people. So it's a process of collaboration that involves young people, it involves staff, it involves community, and it involves that absolute knowledge base. And what you need is a compass, which is a values thing of where you're trying to get to. Now, I am now going to pass on to the next slide, which is Fulhurst. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Rich, to give a sense of what you've been up to. And then Mary is going to talk to some of the lovely, wonderful young people from the school. So, Rich, it's over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Kathryn. Welcome, everybody. So, yeah, so just obviously was asked to give a bit of a sense of our journey, really, and it is very much a journey. We are in the process of changing and fulfilling our belonging ambition. But I just want to give you a flavour of the work that we've been doing, and our wonderful students will obviously give you their take on things very shortly as well. But I think probably the most relevant starting point was for us. Like many schools across the country, kind of post-pandemic, we found the need to re-establish systems, processes, and to a certain extent, regain control. And certainly in the first sort of 12 to 18 months post-pandemic, we again mirrored what lots of schools in the UK and wider in the world were facing, was spikes in poor behaviour, and there was a multitude of reasons for that that I won't go into, but is kind of widely known. But again, our journey then is therefore no different than most of the schools, particularly. For context, we are a school of just over 1,500 students, and the students are 11 to 16. And when I was in post, I've been in post for just over 18 months. I inherited an incredible amount of what we call fixed term exclusions, so suspensions, and these equated to in the first year of 22-23, we had just over 1,200 days of suspension. That's what I inherited, and then we began our work on some of the things that at the time I didn't really realise was forming part of our belonging journey. But over that academic year of 22-23, very much became clearer and clearer that is what we were doing. We were able to achieve a drop of just 1,000 days, but it's really in this latest academic year that we have seen the results of our belonging journey. We are on track to do fewer than 400 days of suspension, which still, in the context of some schools, might be high, but for us and where we've come from over the last 18 months is a huge achievement, and one which signifies a lot of the work that we have been doing on belonging, and the fact that we can create a more inclusive environment for our students, and the numbers there reflect that. But obviously, our journey is much more than just the numbers. Those are often what people are interested in, and the headlines are obviously what lots of people are interested in. But obviously what sits beneath that is a whole host of different strategies and initiatives that we have been doing. One thing that I want to make clear is that we, to reduce those numbers and to do those things, it hasn't meant a compromising on standards. It hasn't meant accepting poor behaviour. It hasn't been being kind of soft or anything, and those things. In fact, what it was a journey that was almost at a very different angle to some of the schools. So, in fact, Kathryn and I met probably just over 12 months ago or so at a national behaviour conference, where it was very clear that the national trend, and has been for some time in the UK, again, have been one of command and control, and where lots of schools have gone down incredibly strict rules. And again, this was born out of the need again to regain control post-pandemic, as I said. But it's at that point that I realised that really that isn't our ambition, and that's not the way that I wanted to lead a school. And it certainly didn't fit with where I felt comfortable, and I didn't believe that was going to help our young people. So it's that work that we then embarked on with Kathryn, and there are certain core things that underpin the work that we did, and those are the core principles of school belonging, which again we can go into at a later point. But essentially what we did is that we did some basic things about promoting certainty in adult behaviour. Was probably one of the biggest things that we did. Our students had to feel safe, they had to feel heard, and more importantly, they had to feel noticed. Those are the key things that we did and that we led on. The need for compassionate leadership and for understanding of our students, their context, their thoughts, their feelings, their ambitions, everything they bring with them on a day-to-day basis through the school gates, was also a great need, and we ensure that our leadership team leads with compassion, and again, that's something we are continually working with. And it's also that determination to serve our community. We are Fulhurst Community College, and therefore we are inherently here to serve our community, and we had to make strides to make sure that we were doing that when we knew who our community was, and do work to engage in all aspects of our community as well. So we embarked on all of those things. One thing that we also looked at, and again, you know, some of our young people may talk about really, is that lots of schools, again, in the UK over the last few years, have talked very much about improving cultural capital. But what's of equal importance, if not more, and again, referencing kind of post-pandemic, is the need for social capital, is a need for students to understand, you know, how to adapt, how to deal with the challenges that they face, how to rely on each other, and how to rely on the adults in their lives to guide them through these challenging times that they face. So that's just a very brief overview of the things that we have done. And like I say, we can go into a few more details, and I'm more than happy to do that outside of the meeting as well, if anybody is interested. But what I think is probably going to be more interesting, which is one of the reasons why I wanted this to happen, is for you to talk to some of our young people about this. So the wonderful Dame Mary Marsh is going to pose some questions to them, and I have told them they can be as honest as they wish, and just talk freely about the things that we have doing. And some of those things they have known have been part of our belonging journey. Some things that we have done haven't been quite so obvious, but I'm sure they will share their wonderful insights with you.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure for me to be part of this very interesting discussion around this really important research. For me, the power of students to help us get things right has always been front and center of how I've approached things. And in the days where people used to talk about exclusion, I absolutely refused to ever use that word. My concern is to build on inclusion and belonging. So I just wanted to ask the three of you, you can chip in whatever order you like, that those particular four things that Mr. Parker Muggs has just said to us, in terms of your voice, how have you managed to use your voice and use your voice with each other to understand better how to improve things? Because I think you have done quite a lot of talking across different groups of young people. So you can tell me about how valuable that has been for you to have your voice and have your voice heard in the school.
So talking about voice, I think that not only young people should have a voice, but I think the family needs to be heard as well. Because if the families are heard as well, that means there's a better bond between young people and families, and also the staff. And if there's a better bond, then everyone feels included, and inclusion will be natural and not performative.
And have you noticed that change in the time you've been doing more of this recently?
Yeah, I feel like young people and staff are more connected into school, and they build a better bond with teachers. And if students build better bonds with teachers, that for me, it means that they learn better and they take more from their lessons, other than just maybe messing around or looking out the window when they shouldn't be.
And do you think that your parents understand better what goes on during the day in schools than perhaps in school than they did before you started these discussions?
I think our school offers a variety of connection between young people and families. So I think my family was heard from the start of my journey of Fulhurst till when it ends. But from other schools, it might be important that needs to be one of their objectives.
Very interesting, thank you. And one of the others too, if Egar or Safia, if you could say something about how you found your voice to be heard and how you shared that, because I think you've done some interesting things in having opportunities to talk one-on-one across different groups and really try and understand amongst yourselves the issues. rather than it all being directed by the teachers. So if you could tell me something about that, that would be helpful. Of any groups you've been part of, or ways in which you've learnt what didn't work and what does work.
I feel like our school being able to like pick people to talk to like throughout like different year groups, yeah, makes it easier for us to understand like what's going on in different year groups. Because I feel like if a teacher's talking one-on-one to a child won't be able to express their words more. Like if they see like their fellow peers like talking to each other, I feel like we'll be able to understand how they feel, like if they feel safe, if they feel like they belong in school. And if not, like we can adapt to it, tell the teachers, and then make a change in our school.
That's helpful. And is there any further perspective on that? Because I think you've had quite a lot of time where you've shared thoughts quite independently of the teachers, and then brought what you've learnt into the better understanding.
It would be interviews.
In school, like we take interviews with children, and like we have this thing, like a map of our school. And obviously for the younger years, we get them to colour in the places where they feel safe and belonged. Because like they're not able to express their feelings in words. So we use pictures, so that we use like a different like ranges of colours, like red for like if you don't feel safe in an area, or blue when you feel safe, and different colours so they can like elaborate how they feel. But so they elaborate how they feel, and we'll ask them, why do you feel this way? And obviously we take that and take it to further. Yeah.
That's and have you had discussion about the way in which the kind of rules by which you govern what should happen in the school? No, not what you should not do, but what you should, put in a positive way. Has that come out of these discussions when you've had? I like the idea of using colours on against the as a way of expressing how you feel. But has that helped you develop a better way of defining where the boundaries are? The things that make things difficult for people in school. Has that helped?
Yeah, definitely a lot.
And have there been other groups of you working together to develop any kind of a list of what the kind of behaviour you should do? Have you worked sort of collectively, like a code of conduct of some sort? Have you had a chance to think about developing that?
Yeah, we have more people in like this little group of ours, like 15. Yeah, we've got 15 people in this group, so like we all share our ideas to make sure everyone feels included.
Yeah, so the students are undertaking a project where they are leading on student voice, and by way of interviewing all students in the school. The ambition is for us to complete all 1,500 by the end of the first term next year. But you guys have been interviewing them rather than a school leader interviewing and trying to learn what's going on in their school. You guys have been talking to the young people directly, haven't you, and posing those questions. So do you want to share what sort of things have maybe come out of that? Any ideas that you can share that experience, things that you've learned or understood about things from that experience?
I think a lot of the people that we've been interviewing have like felt safe and like decided that's all right to talk to us about places where they feel safe or where they don't. And I think like talking to a leader makes them like they don't really want to express it, they don't know what you're going to do with the information. But as like younger children, they know that they kind of feel like that bit more of a connection between us.
And I'm just going to add something there, because I've met all this lot here. I've had the most wonderful time just going in and seeing what they've been doing. And I have to say that the school's now got the most incredible team of student researchers and student leaders. And so they are really stepping into, I think, that's fair to say, isn't it, Rich? That, you know, part of the leadership of the school now, and all of the challenges that faces. So I think this is really work in progress, but it's just so wonderful. And Rich, I think you need to repeat what you said about that. The intention is that they're going to interview every child in the school. It's a pretty massive operation.
Yeah, so that's, and I think that's what came out very, very early on, is just, I think, you know, there are very traditional ways of leaders doing and engaging student voice, and I would never in a million years go back to that model. And I think it's really kind of changed how I have thought about that, because as we've just heard, as you know, Safi has just pointed out, is that, you know, the honesty in which peers will talk to each other far outweighs what they will tell me or what they think I want to hear. And so then I go away with a very different perspective. And what I want is honesty. What I need is to understand exactly what their experience is. If we want to, and they are very much part of that conversation, then what comes out of that is that then once we understand what people want to improve, what experiences the students are having, we then work much more collaboratively in them helping to shape the journey that the school is going on, and that's part of their leadership and part of their skills that they are developing. And I take a very much a back seat on that, because, like I say, the honesty, the results that are coming out of it are absolutely phenomenal. And that then I think the speed at which then we can change and make these improvements, that's probably been one of the biggest things, is that we understand where our priorities are. And our students can help then guide us. The leadership team of students can then guide those decisions that we make, you know, whether that's over physical changes to the environment of the school, so that increases the sense of safety when, you know, 1,500 students are all moving around together on you know, in one area, or, you know, whether that's opportunities that we have. So do you want to just tell them very quickly about some of the rewards things that we've done, haven't we? So we changed our reward strategy, and again, this came out of things that they learned and found. So who wants to tell them very briefly about that? Yeah, go for it.
Basically, our school, like, we changed like our whole rewards thing, because normally most of the schools, like in the summer, everyone will go to Alton Towers. While for us, we changed it because not everyone in our school would want to go to one place. Because like there'll be like a part of us that will be like, oh yeah, I'm so excited to go. But then there'll be a group of people who'll be like, I don't feel comfortable, I don't really want to go because it's not my spec. Like, so for us in my school, we've got like different experiences that happen weekly, like crazy golf, animal experiences, like birds of prey, like when animals will come in our school and like we'll just get to know them, and like sports focus at, like we just get a lot of stuff like hotcakes, cookies, inflatables, get the whole lot, the whole shebang. Like, I feel like it's good because like it lets everyone get involved in things that they like, instead of going to one place that not everyone will be feeling like not everyone will be enjoying the place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've worked really hard on, one significant change is just the importance of students feeling acknowledged for their hard work. So, you know, again, being really honest and going, do you know what, sometimes it's really hard. It's hard to get up on time. It's hard to make sure that you're wearing the right uniform. It's hard sometimes to make sure you've got all the right equipment, you know, with a multitude of things that might be happening in our personal lives as well. And for students to do that day in, day out is a fantastic thing. And they need to not wait to get to the end of an academic year to be acknowledged for that, going to a place like a theme park where they might not actually really want to go and see as a reward. So what Ada's just said there is that, you know, we've really looked at kind of changing those and much smaller and regular experiences, I suppose is how it's best to describe them, where then it feels like that actually there will be a time and place for me to feel that I am rewarded and acknowledged, and I feel seen and I feel heard and I feel noticed, and that's done on a regular basis, rather than just kind of waiting to what you know, some schools do, which is wait to the end of academic years to put in these big rewards, which can often be incredibly expensive as well. And we found this a much more cost-effective way of doing that.
And not only that, sounds like a really positive way forward. And what you're saying is that you do think that overall that everybody is beginning to feel safer, And do you think that that this thing of having a voice, that everybody knows how they know how to speak up if they've got a concern, do you think that's got better?
Yeah, definitely.
And is that, sorry, carry on. Yes, carry on.
I think so. When we had those interviews, I wanted to touch on what Kathryn said about agency. I think young people believe that what they say and do makes a difference because of those interviews, and they come out of those interviews feeling belong because they've actually talked to another one of their peers and they feel like they've done a difference for the school, which makes them happy and included in the community.
I'm going to have to just move us on from this brilliant discussion, because I think because of time and because I want to get to Mohammed, because the piece of the jigsaw that Mohammed's done is how do we take these issues on. And you guys, you students can come in and ask Mohammed something later on. And one of the questions in the chat box was, can you show us something about a changing culture? And I said, hang on, you'll see it at Fulhurst. And I think you've seen that. And I love that comment about what agency really means and so on. So sadly, I need to press the pause button here. And we're just going to move to the next slide. But it's also taking these issues on in a different kind of way. I'm going to just do this one really, really quickly, because it's about the notion, and this is what we're really working out at the school, about how the sense of belonging in school is connected to your sense of belonging in the community and to your sense of belonging as a citizen. And I just want to flag that up because it's actually really, really important. Next slide, please. And so we're coming to this compassionate and purposeful leadership, and coming to the bit where I'm going to call on Mohammed. And I'm just going to float in, respond to a couple of other questions. A lovely question from Judy from the LEU of how we're going to roll this out. We meaning Rich and I, had a fantastic meeting with colleagues, senior colleagues across secondary schools in Leicester, and we're doing a sharing journey with them of how have we done it. And so in Leicester with the secondary schools, there's a real plan there. There's a number of local school groupings, trusts coming together, and we're building a leadership program for school leaders, which will be interesting. And we'll obviously have young people's perspective as a key bit of that. Lots of really great questions about research, and these are just great researchers. Yes, they're using quantitative research. We've also been working with staff. The staff have been working with them on research skills. These are just part of that jigsaw. Next slide, please. So the leadership bit is really key. These are some of my favorite leadership pictures from work I did years ago with John Macbeth. And if you haven't seen my previous book, it's still available, downloadable for free from UCL Press. But I put that one up because there is still this real divide, Rich said it, between the command and control and much more relational forms of leadership. And if you have not yet read the Child Q report, I mean, which is truly heartbreaking, I think you should, because how it always seems to me, I know the police are being castigated for their role in this, but for me, how could a school find itself in that position of what happened to that young people? And it's that division, that image there of leadership, I think sadly is still there in some of our schools. It's not there in Fulhurst. And if the principal was here, she'd say, we haven't got perfection yet, but they're certainly working in that direction. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over in a minute to the wonderful Mohammed, because I think, you know, we've talked about research, the knowledge base. We've talked about something of the process, and you've got a flavour of what's happening, and it is real collaboration between myself and the schools and within the schools. And we haven't talked about the staff, but the staff have been really involved. And if you talk to the staff are so involved in this work and so positive and excited in it. So the really big thing here, and Mohammed, I'm going to pass over to you, is given what we've been talking about research, given what we've been talking about the importance of these issues, how are we really going to get these issues to the attention of policymakers? Because clearly, you know, they set the climate of what is possible, not just about resources, it's about the framework of possibilities. So Mohammed, can I pass over to you now? You're somewhere
Absolutely, Kathryn. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
And also thank you for inviting me to this panel. And it's a pleasure to be here. And it's also a pleasure to see our young folks contributing their authentic experience of what it means to belong. So it's always humbling to learn from them and to work with them. So just to your question, because again, I'm seeing here, why do policymakers need to be involved in school belonging issues, given what we discussed thus far? Let's begin first by defining what does a policymaker do? What's their job? So when we say you make policy, what does that mean? It means you identify societal problems, you set priorities, and you work on designing, implementing, evaluating strategic action, hopefully and ideally through a significant level of public participation and public engagement, because again, you want these policies to mean something, and you want these policies to be implemented and sustained and supported, and there is ownership for it. So you cannot have this social engagement if you don't create the culture for school belonging to begin with. Because again, school belonging is much grander than just belonging to school, but you're really creating I believe the sense of efficacy, where the school nurtures in you the values of citizenship. And it's critical, because this is what policymakers are about, really, I think, promoting a sense of social cohesion and a sense of ownership. And you cannot have that ownership if you don't feel like you belong and that you own something. This is really very important. I think just if you were to ask a policymaker why students should feel like they belong, even just from I would say, narrow educational standpoint, they would, many of them would point you to some of the international assessments right now that are very specific about school belonging as a predictor of whether students do well in academics or not. So when you take, for example, the third International Mathematics and Science Survey, school belonging sits right there as a predictor of whether fourth graders or eighth graders are going to succeed academically or not. Like, it's a contributing factor, which is really very important. And another piece that's very much linked to it is the I would say the frequency of students' absence. And the higher the absence, and I've heard, as I listen, I've heard, I think I would, the Mr. Parker, if I believe correct, he talked about supervision, and he talked about fewer days of suspension. And suspension means less time in classroom, less time in school, meaning less time in learning. So this is critical, and it does have an important direct effect on whether the students perform as expected or not. And as policymakers, we are in good hands if all of our children are doing well, and we are in for a bit of some trouble if we're seeing a trend of students feeling like they don't belong in school, they don't see a sense or a purpose in schooling, in learning. And these are really major concerns and major red flags to worry about. And as you know, Kathryn, and everybody here, there is the Convention on the Rights of the Child as early as 1982 it deeply enshrined the rights of the child, like the freedom of expression. You take, for example, freedom of association, right to education, minority and indigenous rights, etc. And focus on the best interest of the child is something that is well protected by the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is really a major framework that defines the success for us as policymakers. I hope I've addressed this question, Kathryn.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what I'd like to do is, Mahan, if you stay on, and I'm just going to, and if everybody else can come on as well, because I'm going to read out some of the questions. I want to broaden the discussion and make some of those connections in different kind of ways between some of the things. And I want our students at Fulhurst to join in as well. I'm just going to read out one question because it's really, it's a long one, but I'll read out. This is from Karima. I hope you don't mind, Karima. Thanks for organising the webinar. She said she's been, for 11 years, she's been seeing how students from different countries have been kind of losing their sense of belonging and meaning in coming to school. And I think other people will kind of recognise that too. And so she's asking for the strategies that promote and enhance that sense of behaviour and learning and belonging, particularly for those who come from the most vulnerable environments. And I think you've all touched on that, but I think it's a central question. And one of the projects that I'm working with, and I don't know if Katie's here, and there's a Katie in the chat box there, but I'm working with Thrive, which is a special needs trust on these issues, because the thing of agency is really key there, so that young people with special needs, with lots of lovely staff doing great things for them, but how do you develop their sense of agency so that they can but learn to speak for themselves, which is a kind of key bit of the whole jigsaw. So I think it's how we put all of those things together. And so, you know, what is it that we need to be saying to our different governments and policymakers? What is it we need to be saying to other schools? And I think I'd like to just come back to our students and say, hey guys, you've got lots of people listening to you. What messages do you want to give about belonging, about what schools should be doing? Because you talked about agency, you talked about other things. What do you think other schools should be doing that you've experienced that is really going to move this on? And supposing our Secretary of State for Education were to come and visit you, what are you going to say to her about what she should be saying? So can we, Rich, is that okay? Because I think your students should kind of come in on this. And what do they think policymakers should be doing on this?
Yeah, I think when you touched on culture, Kathryn, I think celebrating different cultures makes a huge difference also. And not just celebrating, like, let's say, a culture day. I think it should be celebrated the whole year, and how different continents have different cultures. Because that's what makes people bond and connected. That's what makes different cultures connect to each other. And yeah, as I said before, I think it's making inclusion natural, not performative.
Yeah. Okay, what about your other guys from Fulhurst? What messages do you want to give to all these other people who are listening? And if they're not here, they're going to be listening to this. What messages? Come on, this is your chance, your moment.
I think they should promote like the type of stuff we do, but not just as a one-time thing. Like in the long term, like interviews or like focus groups, and just promote that belonging is like a normal thing. It's not just, oh, we're just doing it for a survey or something to collect data. I think it should just be like an all-rounder, and that recognising belonging should just be recognised the whole way through a child's life at school.
Yeah.
I think the question of culture is quite interesting. Just kind of to touch back on that in terms of, so one thing that we did start to do is we are a diverse school. You know, Leicester on the whole is incredibly diverse, and I think celebrating that regularly is something that we acknowledged and started to work really hard on. But it started off as a one-off kind of event, and then is kind of transforming into something much wider than that. So I think it's looking at what schools are already doing, and as we've spoken about before, Kathryn, that fall under that umbrella, but actually what can we then start to expand upon, which filter then into different aspects of day-to-day school life rather than just events as well. So as I know, you know, you guys sat here, our culture day is quite the event, isn't it? And that is a wonderful experience. Do you want to tell a little bit more about that and the sort of things that we do?
Yeah, we have a variety of different foods that people can enjoy throughout the day. We also have different kinds of performances that people from different cultures do. And most importantly, we learn about different cultures. For example, like assembly, where we learn about Asian culture or South American culture and food, background, the history. It's just so important.
I'm just doing a couple of questions here. This is an interesting one. Kellyanne, I'm going to come back to you on this one. Another one from Judy Ellaby from the NEU. The DFE are talking about a wellbeing measure in relation to school. Do you see a belonging measure being part of this? And I'll just add that, because Kelly's done some great stuff on this, I think that's positive and useful, but just suddenly having, oh, we'll all do the test and measure is just kind of only a bit of what it's about. There are good management, but what you guys are all doing at Fulhurst and other schools is very different and much more profound. So we don't want just a tick box measure thing. Kellyanne, I'm going to throw this over to you. Judy from the NEU is asking the question. So
you know, as somebody that's done a lot of research with school belonging measures, I see
that's
them
some great measurements. Yeah, she's the expert, Judy. This is the expert.
I see them as very valuable in terms of at least having a baseline and then something to compare to. Something like PISA, for instance, but with all its flaws, that's the Program for International Student Assessment, provides us with snapshots over time, and I think that is helpful. However, measuring belonging is entirely complicated because it's so dynamic. It is a snapshot in time. Belonging and sense of belonging changes. Sometimes we might measure it at the start of a student's journey where they might not have had that time to develop that sense of belonging to that space. So I think it comes with a lot of disclaimers. And if I was to just quickly respond and advocate for other approaches, it would be to look at dynamic ways of measuring belonging. Perhaps it's through appreciative inquiry, perhaps it's through interviewing students, rather than just simply saying whether or not students belong or not. I think you can do a little bit more to create sort of change with what you're measuring.
Yeah, and I think my thing, because you know, I don't know if David's here from Flake Fleet Primary, but you know, I've been up there quite a few times and done work with there, and we've talked about the fact that it's always changing. It's a new group of children. You can measure belong, but a new group of children come in, and in some schools it's changing all the time because of turnover. So I think it's with caution. It's lovely if the DFE is doing something, but basically having a little survey doesn't kind of solve the issues. And I think I would say, if you're going to do something, I would involve a team of young people, some of them like the Leicester lot, and say, hey, how can we kind of keep tabs on it? How could the government in a useful way keep tabs on it, ask the students to do it, use the good measures that you've developed, Kellyanne? I think that's really important. There's another question here. How can schools effectively support and sustain teacher sense of belonging? And what are the implications for well-being, motivation and retention? I'll just add one thing, and then I'll get a couple of other people to come in. But in my own research, and the evidence is that basically it's really simple. When you get the belonging stuff right, in schools where belonging, you know, not only is it, as Mohammed said, better performance for students, well-being, sense of being. Students are happy and they stay in the school, and there's a lot of evidence on that, on motivation and retention. And it's all about agency. It is, again, if as a teacher you feel that you're being listened to, then you're kind of happier to stay there. So from a union's point of view, this belonging stuff is as important for staff, all staff, as it is for young people. And Mohammed, I'll come back to you on the staff bit, because I know in Morocco you've got some really big, if I could put it, not belonging challenges in terms of, kids who are out on the streets and so on. And so how are you thinking there in, what is it is going to really engage staff in this to help move that issue on?
Number one, know these kids, meaning data. So the data says that we have 300,000 kids who drop out of school every year, and we have a student population of about 8.1 million students. So 300,000 students not being able to continue schooling is a major concern, really a major concern, because again, many of these children do not continue into vocational training, for example, and they end up in this category that's now called not in employment, not in education, and not in training, which is about 1.5 million out of a population of almost 38 million. So we're talking about a population between the age of 15 and 25. And if lots of your national development objectives rest on the fact that these young people are engaged and they are involved in productive opportunities that serves them first before it serves this country, then you got a major problem on your hand, and you got to identify. First of all, you identify these kids. So it's not enough to talk about the numbers, but it's really very important to unpack the numbers a little bit, and maybe then you start realizing that boys are dropping out more than girls, especially in middle school and in high school. So then I think when you bring in this gender lens, then your approach to it becomes a little bit more differentiated on what is it that makes boys drop out more than girls, which is a major problem. Then when you look at geography, for example, in Morocco, we have 12 regions. And out of these 12 regions, there are 2 regions that stand out, that are the regions with the highest dropout. But then when you start looking at factors, it's not just school factors, but also access to schooling in terms of the paved roads. Do the children, for example, have school transportation? And do they have canteens? So we're really talking about basics. And then when you get into school, what's that sense of self-worth that's nurtured at the level of the school? This is where it gets into what does the teacher do to prioritize the sense of belonging as equal as having outstanding scores in mathematics and science. Because again, as we all know, the most important predictor of a child doing well in primary school is actually feeling safe. Before anything else, you cannot expect them to speak, ask questions, be curious, just be who they are if they don't feel safe. Is this a reality clear enough for the school teachers or not? Because again, that sense of safety is not a second, it's not a back burner type thing, it's not secondary type thing, but it's really primary. So these core things are really very important from a policy standpoint. You know where the children are, you're able to track them, and at the same time, you're able to put in place the support systems. And we have a growing and very, very encouraging support system of what we call second chance schools. So the second chance school, which is a growing phenomenon right now, I think now it's moving into integrating 80,000 of these 300,000 at least by 2026, is the ability to go and work with the students where they are. So be it in rural areas, urban areas, the priorities, the challenges, the reasons that push them out are not the same. And really, I think, which is a very encouraging sign as well, is that I'm seeing a shift, especially in public schools, where it's not just about academics, but what we call, and even the word is a bit of a misnomer because we call it extracurricular. It should not be extracurricular. It has to be at the core of the curriculum activities. Because again, it's all about nurturing that sense of self-awareness, social awareness, self-regulation, relational skills that these children need to have in order to negotiate being with others. Because again, at the end of the day, because we respect the children, we respect their maturity and their ability to grow. It's not just about providing safe spaces for them, but really working with them to develop the skills to be able to engage with all kinds of spaces and make sure that they identify I would say, proper ways to make sure that they belong, because it's not always perfect.
Yeah, thanks.
And it's not always easy. And again, having that trust in the child to figure out or sort out what kind of language, be it body language, verbal language, any kind of language, to figure out how they can carve a space in sometimes otherwise a bit hostile environment is as important as making sure that the environment is not hostile.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that whole thing, I mean, the second chance schools, and are also just understanding how deep and profound these issues are and how fundamental, which is why, yeah, it's great if the DF are going to do something, but come on, that's just one thing. This is more than that. It's deeper than that. Right. Some other couple questions that we can't really answer because they're so complex, but like Sully, a really interesting question about teachers understanding the complexity of young people's lives and what they bring. You're absolutely right. But I think once the school gets engaged in a belonging process, and that's actually what you do, or that's actually part of the whole thing. In my book that comes out next year, there will be a chapter on Full House, so you can find out more, which that'll be really what Mitch and I've been leading on there. And then I think there's a really interesting question, Johanna, about intentionality. Yeah, there's been a lot of talking and thinking and deliberating. There's a lot of intentionality about what Full House is doing. There's the intentionality, I think, from the principal to give the deputy time to do this. Is intentionality in terms of what teachers are doing. There's intentionality in what young people are doing, and hopefully the research data, and as we provide more information and more details than that, that's about intentionality. So you can be really looking in a more purposeful way about what the evidence is and how you should use it. I just want to put it because it's one of my favorite pictures, one of my favorite drawings, which is the slide. We will slide past the slide 19 because I love it. And if you haven't seen this, I love it because it's the most wonderful image of belonging. It's the hands, isn't it? I belong, this child. And that's the evidence on belonging. And this is really what we're talking about for young people. And a lovely message from Katie there, that's from the Thrive Network that I'm working with, that building the agency of children with special needs is particularly important. And our last slide, it's just a nice picture of saying, yeah, thank you to the global leaders, some of them who have just been texting saying we couldn't get on. We're working towards this belonging togetherness agreement. We will send you a note with links. We'll let you know when the full Delphi study is being published. Thanks, you can take that away. And just put everybody on screen for a minute. We've got a couple of minutes for just any quick comments. Ching, you might want to say something. because she did this fabulous work in Africa with all these children's stories. That is so, the book thing you did, Ching, in Africa, it seems to me is so much part of that belonging story, because children, it's children's identity, it's who they are. So I'm going to get Ching to come in, Mary, and anybody else who's got something to say, and any of those lovely young people. So just say, we've got literally a minute. So Ching, come in and say anything that you wish to say.
Thank you, Kathryn. I want to say we, as a research team, we cried a bit when we were reading the children's books, because as you say, those books reflect their values, their identity, deeply embedded in the rural communities. The life was very challenging for them in South Africa, especially in the rural communities. But the sense of where they belong and how much the agency they wanted to change for the better came through really strongly, and showed how much they valued the relationships within the schools, within the communities, and how much it meant families, schools, and the extended family in that context meant everything about the environment, social and intellectual environments in which children can grow in a very healthy way. It's not just physically may be challenging, but mentally, that sense of belonging brings about happiness in a much, much deeper way.
And I think, you know what? I think happiness is a pretty good note almost to end on. It's happiness and joy, and from that other things grow. And one of the booklets I wrote years ago, co-wrote with some students, was "When you feel good, you learn well," which I think says it all. And I think that, you've had a flavour of so many things. I want to say thank you for all of you for coming. We will let you have the links. You'll see more about research, but join us in this endeavour. This is a joyful endeavour, working on these things. I've had a fabulous time in Fulhurst, and I would just repeat that, because the student isn't there who said this to me. The first time I went in and met the students, and I interviewed a group of students, and one of the students, and he said to me, "Now you've interviewed me, but what are you going to do? Are you going to interview," you've really poking your finger at me, "all the other students in the school?" I said, "Well, maybe I'm not going to do that, but I hope you lot are going to do that." But it was the remembrance of that. And I think it's so incredible that you guys are going to have interviewed everybody in the school. And I think it's that lovely thing, it changes. So how do you keep the belonging going? It's the essence of a school, is evolving, moving, changing. So what do you do in the future as other young people come into school? And I think that's lovely. So we're going to round off now. If Dina, if we say our farewells here, and if the presenters could just stay on a minute, that would be great. Mary, is there any final? So the dameship for services to children and families. One final word. I think it should come from you, Kath. What would you like to say?
Well, I think that the essence of what you're all expressing here is just so powerful. And I do like the point that was made in one of the questions, which is, this isn't just good relationships between students and teachers. It is about good relationships between students and students, as well as teachers and students. But also, I like the fact that the students brought in the importance of parents as well, because I think it is a partnership, this whole process. And for some parents, that's some unknown turf if their own experience was not entirely positive. So there's lots of opportunities. I think what you have brought together here and the insights from around the world are extraordinary. But at the heart of it is this simplicity of belonging, which I think you cannot. It is profound, and it's very simple. I congratulate you all for all the work you're doing, and I thank the students everywhere and the teachers working with them who are taking this forward so brilliantly. So thank you. Thank you for including.
I must say thank you. You'll get in a week or two, you'll get a note from Kellyanne and I, a little bit more of the summary, contact things, and so that you can get back to us, and we will alert you to when the Delphi stuff is being done. But keep in contact, lots of brilliant conversations, and we'll look at more of the other questions. Team Diana tells me that when she closes this meeting, she closes it for us. So I'm going to say goodbye and thank you to all of you, and thank you to Ching for her she's a wonderful support. And I haven't said thank you to the UCL team who've put all this together and done all the IT and everything, but a great thank you to everybody. And this is just ongoing work, and that's it. Thank you. And to being in our joyful, interesting, and I think purposeful session. And then Kellyanne, may she catch up on some sleep. So thank you to everybody. So we'll just say our goodbyes and our farewells, and I will
Thank you, Kathryn.
Bye.
Thank you very much for one
Thank you.
webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye.